Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Maths Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. Today we'll be talking about how do we find vertex using the completing the square method, all right? Finding vertex using the completing the square method. All right, like I always say, if you've not subscribed, please do so and click the notification bell so when I upload new videos, you'll be the first to know. All right, so before we start, it's very important that you try and review the previous videos, all right? It's very key you do that. So because especially how to complete the square method, all right? How to factorize or solve the quadratic equation using the completing the square method, all right? So based on that understanding is where I'm going to talk about this. So if you've not, go to the playlist, select how to use the completing the square method, know all the rules about it, or the 7 rules, or depending on the 7 steps, so you now know how to do it. Here, complete the square method is another way to find the vertex of a quadratic equation. In the previous video, I showed you how to use the formula, but in this method, you will get to the end and you'll be able to find your x and y coordinates directly. So if you remember in the formula method, you get the x, you have to go back to the original equation and impute to get a y. But here, you're not going to be plugging x anything into any original equation. It's going to give you directly, all right? So let's start. So there are 5 things or the 5 rules for you to take note of, or the steps. The first thing you have to do is that you have to apply all the previously discussed rules, okay, or steps on how to use the complete the square method in solving this quadratic equation, all right? So you have to follow all the steps we've talked about. So for instance, the first thing you do is that you have to open the bracket, do you remember? So you have to do all those we've talked about. So the first thing, the first rule, you have to then apply the previously discussed rule. Or steps, okay, on how to use the complete the square method. All right, in solving quadratic equation. All right, so you have to do this part, and if I believe, Shelly, you have to take note from step 1 to step 7. Okay. Now the key thing is that you have to leave your answer in the complete the square form. Okay. So remember when we talked about this, I told you when you get to complete the square form, you can now equate to 0 to find for x, okay? But in this case, you just leave it in the complete the square form, which is the ax plus p squared plus q form. Okay, so you always do that. So when you're done with that, the next thing that you have to do, then you have to change the sign of the p-value. So the p you have here, you have to change the sign of the p-value. And the resultant will represent the x of the vertex. The resultant will represent the x vertex, the x coordinates of the vertex. Okay, so that means if, for instance, we have ax plus b squared plus q, so that means the x of the vertex will be equal to minus what? P. If you have ax minus p or squared plus q, the x of the vertex is going to be, you change the sign for this, so it's going to be what? Plus p. Is that okay? Then number 3, when you're done with that, then you now take the value of q, all right? That is in this case, without changing the sign. So without changing the sign to represent the y vertex. Okay, so that means in this example now, let me get this away. So that means in this example, okay, that we just talked about, so x plus p squared plus q, the y of this is gonna just be the q. Are you seeing it? You don't change the sign. If it was ax plus p and the q was a minus, then the y is going to also be minus q. So basically, you don't change the sign. So the x, you're going to change the sign. If it was for the p, you change it. If it was positive, it becomes negative. But if it's for the q, you don't change the sign. So the next part, number 4, when you're done with that, the next thing you have to do, you then have to write down. Don't worry, I'm going to solve an example to explain this concept, all right? So you have to write down x and y as an ordered pair. As an ordered pair in the form x, comma, y. So for instance, in that example, when you have a into brackets, x plus p all squared plus q. So that means you're going to write it in the form of x, comma, y. So that means the x, remember I will say you have to change this, it's going to be minus p, and the q, you're going to leave it like this, it's going to be q. Is that okay? If you have something like ax minus p squared minus q, assuming that was your answer, then x minus y, x comma y, the x, you're going to change this, it's going to become what? P. The q, you won't change anything, it's going to remain the same. So you can see playing with different format. Then the last one, so you can continue that way, etc. Okay, you can play around with more format. Then number 5, what you can now do is that you can now check by drawing the graph. So if you can check if you're correct. Step 5 is if you're asked to do so. Okay, if you're not asked to do so, or you don't need to, but you need to find a vertex where you want to talk about sketching. All right, so I'm going to talk about sketching very soon, but if you want to know how to sketch a quadratic graph, right, you need to also know how to find a vertex. So it's very important. So you can now check if need be, all right, by drawing the graph. So by drawing the graph of the original question. All right, so this is how you do it, okay? So the first thing you have to do, you have to apply the previously discussed steps on how to use completing the square method. Then for the x, all right, the p-value, you have to keep on changing the sign to give you the x, while for q, you don't change the sign. That value still remains the same. Then you have to now write them as an ordered pair. You have to write it in the form of x, comma, y. All right, so if this is for minus p, q, plus p, minus q, and the rest of it. So you can make more. And also you can check if need be by drawing the graph of the original what question. All right, so for me to be consistent, I'm going to use the exact same examples from the previous video. All right, I'm going to use it here so that we'll get exactly the same answer. So I'm going to just use the same examples, all right, so that you'll see that we'll use the formula in the last video, but now we can also use the completed square method, and you get exactly the same thing. All right, let's take this example now, okay? So the example I gave in the last video, I said, find the vertex, okay, of this equation. So In the last video, I used the formula to get this. So now we're going to use completing the square method to find it. So y is equal to x squared plus 9x plus what? 18. All right, let's go. So the first step is that we need to apply the previously discussed rules on step on how to do this. All right. So I'm going to just complete the square method now. So step 1. So I'll assume that you've watched the previous video and you've understood how to do it, okay? So that means I told you what you do, you open a bracket, you put x and you put squared. The sign of b is a plus, are you seeing it? Then it will become 9 over 2, half of that, minus 9 over 2 squared plus 18, all right? So we talked about this. So just to remind you again of the values there, we know that in this case here, a is equal to 1. Let me write it closer. We know that a is equal to 1, b is equal to 9, and what? C is equal to what? 18, just to remind you. So now this is the completed square. You have to then simplify. Then it's going to give us x plus 9 over 2 minus 9 squared, 2 squared to give you 81 over 4 plus 18. Minus 81 over 4 plus 18 will give you minus 9 over what? 14. And we have 9x plus 9 over 2 what? Squared. Now we're done. So step 2. So step 2 now said, change the sign of the p-value. The resultant will represent the x-coordinate of the vertex. So it will represent the x-coordinate of the vertex. So the p we have, the p-value we had was what? 9 over 2. So that means the x for the vertex will become minus what? 9 over 2. Is that making sense? Now let's go to step 3. So step 3 now said, take the value of q without changing the sign to represent the y-coordinate of the vertex. So let's go back. What is our q? Our q is minus, all right? Are you seeing it? The q is equal to minus 9 over what? 14. So that means the y is going to be equal to, say, minus what? 9 over 14. Now, step 4, we then need to write this down as an ordered pair. So x comma y, all right? So that means we're going to write it. So x comma y will be equal to, the x is minus 9 over 2, and the y is minus 9 over what? 14. And that will be the answer for that, all right? So for step 5, I told you that you can sketch, all right? I'm going to talk about sketching very soon, in like 2 videos from now. So when we get to sketching, then I'm going to be talking about this. But technically, you can try it yourself, see if you can sketch or draw the graph, okay? Then if you draw the graph, you will notice that the turning point, okay, or the point for this graph, you will see is at minus 9 over 2 and what? Minus 9 over what? 14. Okay, let me pick another question now. So the second question I solved in that video, okay, in the previous video, we're going to do it. You see, we get the same thing. It said, what is the vertex? What is the vertex of, okay, minus 2x squared plus 8x minus 5, all right? We're now solving minus 2x squared plus 8x minus 5. So we're going to start step 1, all right? So the a here is what? Minus 2. The b is equal to 8. And the c is equal to minus 5. So complete the square. We're going to do it. Like I said, you can use any of the methods we talked about. I showed you how to complete the square using the formula. I also showed you when a is equal to 1, when a is equal to minus 1, and I showed you different methods, okay? So I'm going to use the method now when a is not equal to 1, all right? So I know it's the longer one, the formula is shorter, but because I just want to use this opportunity to make sure you revise, it's just a point of revision for me, all right? So to remind us, so the first thing I told you is that we have to factorize the first two terms. So we have minus 2 into brackets, minus 2x squared divided by minus 2, right? Plus 8x divided by minus 2 minus 5. Then that will give us minus 2x squared minus 4x minus 5. Then after which I told you then that you have to then apply completely the square to only the bracket. So I'm going to solve it here, x squared minus 4x. And I told you, because it's just x squared minus 4x, the c is what? 0. Okay? So we'll apply the completing the square method here. Like I told you, you open brackets, when a is equal to 1, you put x here. Minus 4 is the b. You divide it by 2, it will give you minus 2. Then minus the 2 squared, okay? And minus what? Or plus 0. I see it? Then, to now give you x minus 2 squared minus what? 4 plus 0. So that means this answer now, we're going to take it and replace this here. So it's going to be minus 2 into bracket, x minus 2 squared minus 4. So then minus 5. Are you seeing it? Then the next step I told you, you have to expand. Then minus 2 times this will give you minus 2x minus 2 squared. Minus 2 will give you what? Plus 8 minus 5. Are you seeing it? Plus 8 minus 5 will give you what? 8 minus 5 will give you 3. Then plus 3. Are you seeing it? Then we're done. Then this is the answer for step 1 from completing the square method. Now we'll go to step 2. Now in step 2, you will notice something. Step 2 said we should change the sign of p-value, and the resultant will represent the s-coordinate of the vertex. So the p-value we have, you see the p is minus 2, right? So the p is equal to minus 2. So therefore, the x is going to be equal to what? 2. Step 3. So step 3, we go back to step 3. It said take the value of q without changing the sign to represent the y-coordinate of the vertex. So we'll go back. Our q is 3. So that means the y is going to be equal to what? 3. Now, step 4 said that we have to write it as an ordered pair. Okay, so let's go to step 4. It said we have to write x and y as an ordered pair in the form of x comma y. So let's go back. So we're going to write it as x comma y. And we know our x is what? 2, and our y is what? 3. And you see that this is exactly the same answer we had when we use the formula what? Methods. Now, step 5, you can sketch it yourself and draw the graph, okay? And you will see that the vertex for this is at what? 2 and what? 3. All right, so that is that for this. So that is that for how to use the finding vertex using the completing the square method. All right, so the next video I'm going to talk about now, I'm going to talk about how to find the x and y intercept. Now, the reason why I want to do that is that I want to talk about sketching, and there are 5 things to talk about. You need to know how to find the vertex. You need to know how to find the x-intercept, which is similar to the roots. We've done that already. We need to know how to find the y-intercept. We need to know how to find, see the shape or the size and the rest of it. And also, we need to talk about how do we also sketch a linear graph, okay? So there are so many things to talk about. So, I would like to start from the scratch. So that's why the next video, I'm going to quickly talk about how to find the x and y intercept, just to remind us for both linear equation and also quadratic equation, just to remind us. Then from there, we'll now move on to the next one on how to sketch. Is that okay? So I'm going to see you in the next video. And if you have any question, please feel free to stop me. When you see me, ask me a question, send me an email, or better still, if you have a particular topic, you want me to talk about, you can send me an email and I'll get back to you and I'll create a video on that. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.